there's almost a presupposition to suggest that it's possible, if we only thought about it more, to be able to know what those consequences would be. And I don't think that's the case. I think we're talking about complex adaptive systems. I think we're talking about emergent properties. I think we're talking about every time we introduce something new into society, a new technology, a new capability, a new way of doing things, a new way of being in society, there are emergent consequences. There are emergent patterns that we like, and there are emergent consequences that maybe we didn't see or we don't like. I think what we can learn from history, right, is that that will happen, and what we should be thinking about then is not how do we just keep moving forward with what we've got and ignore that which we don't like, but how do we account for what's happening that maybe we don't anticipate or that we don't actually appreciate, and how do we make adjustments and how do we adapt along the way? It's those kinds of questions that I think are going to become more prevalent as we move forward, whether it's unwanted consequences or unintended consequences that are really awesome. How do we actually take advantage of those, right? And how do we adapt our strategies? How do we adapt our businesses? How do we adapt our capabilities to be able to account for emergent properties from a system? So it's interesting to think about the role businesses can play in a hyper-connected world where we can form communities and form societies and create new values and new ways of being almost out of whole cloth in ways we hadn't ever imagined doing before. In the past, many of our societies and many of our rules for actually governing ourselves and our businesses have been based on geography, based on where we live here, based on the resources available to us here, based on who is participating in that society and how is power actually distributed across society. Those were the rules in the past. And some of those rules still apply, but many of them seem to have less relevance now as we go forward, where we can create connections amongst us, where we can find, hey, you're interested in that, I'm interested in that, let's work on that together. And businesses should be able to do the same thing. Businesses should be able to make partnerships and arrangements and deals and associations with other individuals or with other institutions on a global basis. We have to imagine on a going forward basis that borders that we have today, national borders, state borders, province borders, whatever, maybe aren't as relevant as they have been, right? They maybe don't serve the same purpose as they had in the past. And maybe they're getting in the way. Maybe we should be able to move more freely around the world just as we are and find work where we need to find work, or do business where we need to do business. And maybe those borders are going to diminish in the future. I think it might. I think it'll be hard, but I think it might. And I think business has a role to play in thinking about what are the roles of these kinds of connections and how can we actually form associations and arrangements of working together to make the world a better place. I'm going to actually suggest that we start asking ourselves the question that says, what forms of injustice do we want to actually see eliminated? What forms of bias do we want to see eliminated? And as a consequence of those two, what kinds of systems do we want to see change? What system transformation do we need to see to eliminate injustice, to eliminate bias, or at least mitigate them to some extent? I think business can play that role. I think it can work with other institutions to take leading positions and actually push forward better systems of justice, better systems of reducing bias, right, and create a more equitable playing field for all people on the planet as a way of alleviating, say, poverty, as a way of alleviating differences that are unwanted or unwarranted, and as a way of making the world a better place. I think those are open questions. I don't think we ask them in business enough, and I think we should.